Mo friends! Husband night shift reporting for duty. And right after I said my yes in the church, my next thought was, I should paint the object to 7.9. You see, this model was sitting in my display cabinet fully built for almost 10 years, and it's one of the most detailed models I've built. So I think it's cool that tonight we're dealing with some unfinished business from the past, and the paint job will be quite gritty, to say the least. So stick around and you'll see for yourself. This is a Takom kit with Voyager photo etch, Aber gun barrel, Master Club tracks, and lots of handmade details. I broke it into sub-assemblies, washed them in soapy water, and jammed everything I could into my Octopus M2M painting stand. First task, priming the metal parts. I did all of the cladding with pewter foil, and on the real tank, it's a hollow shell built around the hole that was supposed to stabilize the tank if it were hit by a nuclear blast. And I think it also helped it to float over deep mud. The primer on this model is gonna be a vital part of the paint job, so the tank green color from VMS was an obvious choice. These primers work really well, you just need to apply them wet to unlock their self-leveling capabilities. I'll be honest here, this was one of those models that looked good in its raw, unpainted form. But let's try to make the most out of it. So, the first step, a layer of VMS chipping fluid right on the primer. And we'll also deal with a lot of layers. The first one being Protective 4BO from AK Real Color range, the old one. And I applied it straight from the bottle. I mean without any highlighting, not like literally straight from the bottle, that would be too thick. Of course I thinned it down with Mr. Leveling Thinner from Gunze. This model will be all about chipping and distressing, because my idea for it is a tank that's been sitting around outside for years, maybe decades. And then it got a quick service, maybe an engine overhaul, and it was brought back to action. My main inspiration were T-64 tanks from Ukraine in 2014, with lots of color variation in the plain green paint scheme. So we're starting with the darkest color and will continuously work our way towards the lightest, most sun-bleached tones. But even though this is an initial layer, it doesn't mean we have to do a rushed job. Finesse will go a long way, as all of these effects will be visible on the finished piece. So that's the first worn layer done. Not gonna lie, it looks a bit sad and dull, but things will get much funnier from this point. Let's give it another layer of chipping fluid, and this time, we'll lighten the 4BO with Tamiya buff. I made it significantly lighter so the individual layers are gonna be actually visible, but we're still dealing with this desaturated, low-key sad vibe of the paint scheme. Side note, I didn't apply any varnishes on the previous layer, so technically speaking, each coat of chipping fluid is still active, so to say. This means that if we work uncontrollably, we can rub our way right down to the primer, but if we are more gentle and restrained, the layered effect will start becoming more and more visible on every panel. I'll be honest here, this is extremely fun, and I'd like to try this approach on more models in the future, if, of course, the subject matter allows such an effect. Now we have a more prominent texture and the dark spots are beginning to contrast really well with the rest. But before I proceeded further, I decided to lock all of this work in place with VMS flat varnish, and right after that, I laid down another coat of chipping fluid. The next layer will be much happier and yellower. This is also the point where I started applying the individual colors more selectively. The inspirational photo of the worn T-64 was a great help here because without it, I'd be just probably respraying the entire model and chipping it down quite uniformly. Looking back, I kinda wish I did the dark steel chipping using this method as well, but at the time, it wasn't my priority, and you'll see how I'll dealt with it later. Moving on, another layer of chipping fluid, and now we're officially entering Funky Town with these colors. I used a mixture of flat green and yellow green for these patches. They just kinda add saturation in some places, of course all according to references, and the majority of spraying was done with pure yellow green. I actually had two airbrushes loaded at the same time, so I could switch between colors immediately. Also, I forgot to mention that the Takom kit is one of the OGs of this tank. There used to be three: this kit, Panda Hobby, and Amusing Hobby. Out of all three of them, I think the Takom was the best one, although today none of them are available anymore. But Hobby Boss is making one now, so you can try that, and even the good folks from modelers.gr have it. Anyway, I felt again that it was time to lock my work with flat varnish, because the final layers required a lot of precision. I mean, the exotic colors speak for themselves. Again, I had two airbrushes loaded, and for this final layer of yellow, I added a little bit of red into it to give it a warmer hue. These are absolutely extreme, both in terms of color and the contrast. And I gotta say, it's important to have as much contrast as possible in these initial layers, because the weathering can completely hide all of our work if the effects are too subtle to begin with. With 5 layers of chipping fluid and even bigger amount of colors, the final effects are bound to be pretty interesting, don't you think? Oh, and on a final note, even though chipping fluids have no volume once they dry, I made extra sure to try and remove any excess from all surfaces, because even under a layer of varnish, excessive chipping fluid can cause problems later down the road. The searchlight cover was painted red according to another photo, to add a little bit of color to the model. Even the tactical numbers in my reference photo were heavily worn down, so I made a rudimentary mask from paper. When you're not spraying meticulously painted German crosses and numbers on a World War II tank, you can get away with hand-carved stencils. I mean, the nature of the job can sometimes allow primitive solutions such as this. It's simply up to you to decide what's gonna work good enough. In this case, good enough was my motto, and after I was done with the chipping, the numbers were hardly recognizable. So I gave the model one final layer of flat varnish to seal everything. If you want to have a worn finish like this, make sure to try the VMS fluid and varnish by going to the links in the description, but you'll only achieve this type of weathering if you use the affiliate links, okay? Otherwise, it's not gonna work. And I have discount codes for you as well, so just go there, okay? Pretty please? Let's now do some pin washing, and for that, I prepped a bunch of oil paints. But then I remembered that I have this new AK panel liner which I used on the B2 Spirit, and I wanted to try it on an armor model. This paint is unlike anything I've tried. It's much thinner and flows better than enamel washes or diluted oil paints. But does that make it better? Well, not necessarily, or to be more specific, it's only great in certain situations. The name panel liner should give us a hint. It's great for paneling panel lines, duh, but there are not too many of those on this object. Another specific feature of this paint is the extremely fast drying time. That alone wouldn't be an issue, but when you have a matte surface, it likes to bite down really hard. So this means we need to work in small sections and wipe off the excess immediately. I can see myself using it on my armor models in the future, but not for everything. The main thing on this model were countless gaps that were too deep for the panel liner. But the fast drying time means that now we can immediately proceed with the oil dot technique. How cool is that? We'll need the green, white, some sandy oils, and one yellow one. Something. There was a handful of areas where I applied the oil paint heavily diluted, like a localized filter. This was again done according to the reference image. The rest was done exactly as you'd expect when you hear the name oil dot technique. The name and what you see is pretty self-explanatory, but I want to go back and talk about the references I had for the model. Well, for the build part, I had a detailed walk-around from the Kubinka Armor Museum, and that's where I also found inspiration for the crumpled hollow shell around the hull. But if the tank wasn't really used much apart from some off-road trials, then where are you gonna find the references for weathering and whatnot, right? Well, you'll just find similar tanks, or it can be a totally different vehicle, as long as the finish catches your eye and it makes sense in the general context. Some gaps on this model are physical, so no kind of diluted wash can take hold in them, and as such, we need to employ the forced contrast method. A thicker oil paint will hold onto the walls of the gap and also the surrounding area, and then it's super easy to blend it accordingly and take full control of the effect. It looks cool, but it also makes the model look more realistic. Okay, the worn finish on the object has been upgraded, so to say, with washes and oil filters, and it definitely looks crispier and more authentic right now. With textured finishes like this, it's important to keep the oil dots restrained, otherwise they'll hide a lot of the visual texture. Speaking of textures, let's now add the dark steel chipping, and for that, for the first time, I'll use the sponge part of a 3M sanding sponge. It's hilarious to me that I've been using these sanding sponges for years, and I raved about all of those different chipping sponges that I use for chipping, but not even once did I think about using destroyed sanding sponge for painting. I had to go to Greece and meet Lester Plaskett at the Arta model show to learn about this. And just like with the panel liner, I have a few observations. First off, the sponge is really dense and delicate, and as such, the resulting chips are truly delicious. You can still be somewhat heavy-handed and you most likely won't overdo the effect because the sponge is just so intricate. Sponges alone will only take you so far, so now I employed my favorite 502 Uptilum chipping brush and picked out the worn edges. Again, I kinda wish I'd done all of this with hairspray chipping in the beginning, but then again, my focus was the overwhelming tonal variety in the green base color, so it's not such a big deal. And guess what? Silver. Yeah, while we're at it, let's not forget to chip the weld beads as well, and there's a lot of them on this tank. Some of them are pretty massive actually, and the point is, I meticulously sculpted them from epoxy putty, so I'm definitely making them stand out. Although you'll see later, on the finished model, how most of this extreme effect will get toned down. Speaking of that, let's make the tank rusty with oils. And this time, we're going balls to the wall, because again, my idea is a tank that's been outside for years before it was brought back to action. As such, I wasn't worried about the amount of rust. Quite the opposite actually. I was having a lot of fun with these excessive amounts. Again, you'll see later how a lot of the effect will get toned down, but that's not the point. This time actually, it wasn't my goal to hide anything at all. If there was a chance, I used the rust to add additional contrast between parts of the model, but more specifically to this finish, I paid a lot of attention to rust streaks. These are not common on operational vehicles almost at all, especially not on World War II vehicles, but in modern scenarios, things are a bit different. This applies to speckling as well. Normally, I'd keep the paint very diluted and the amount subtle, or I would just not use this step at all, but here, there was no problem. And let me show you something even better, the rust-colored acrylic AK wash. This one is so good and so precise that I used it to greatly enhance the look of every streaking effect, and I also applied it selectively as a filter on those most corroded areas such as the driver's hatch. The tank now really looks like a rusty Hulk that's been rotting outside in a museum or some kind of repair shop, and if you want your models to look just as rusty, get all of those AK goodies through the affiliate link in the description and use the discount coupon I left for you there as well. Just keep in mind, these results are only guaranteed if you use the affiliate link. And take a guess what comes next. Yup, detail painting. This segment will be more chill because there's quite a bit of surface detail on this tank, and I always find it relaxing to switch gears and focus on these small parts. Some of the techniques are totally different than what we usually do on armor models, even though, on the other hand, stuff like wooden tool handles are present on the majority of tanks, so in a way, we paint these all the time. I used a few different approaches this time to up my wood painting game, and I tried even harder on the metal parts. Here I have to shout out Sergio's Weathering Studio on Patreon. Sergiusz is one of the best armor modelers in the world, and he's been sharing a lot of great photo tutorials there, and this non-metallic metal technique is picked up directly from one of those. In the past, I only stippled these gray acrylics on top of each other, but I feel like when the final enamel rust washes are applied, the result is way more refined and authentic this way. What do you think? The tow cable was painted the same way, gray highlights with acrylics, but here I also employed some hairspray chipping. I wanted to add some more vivid color to the model, and blue always looks good. I don't know why would anyone paint the eyelets like this, but I think I saw it somewhere that one time, or maybe I hallucinated it, so why not? Combined with the same enamel rust washes, the result is gonna be very nice. Also, I love how chunky the tow cable is on this tank. I also did a bit of reverse hairspray chipping on the headlights. I applied the grey color of the plastic as the secondary layer, so I had to chip it from below. The insides were painted with a generous coat of AK Super Chrome as usual, and the clear parts were glued with VMS Transpafix. This is one of the most game-changing glues ever made, especially when it comes to clear parts. It doesn't create fog on them, and any excess can be quickly wiped away with their universal weathering carrier light type. Finally, the weird exhausts. Once again, chipping fluid was essential in the process. Heat-corroded metal has a distinct light texture, so a mixture of white and grey or red is a good choice. Everything else is carried out with acrylic and enamel rust washes, but let's speculate in the comments about their shape. My guess is the exhausts have this shape to protect them from mud and water when the tank is floating over a deep bog. What do you think? And also, we somehow got the model to that stage where it looks like a finished piece. If this was a tank in a museum or on a crumbling concrete pedestal somewhere in Eastern Europe, I think this look would be perfect. But in our alternate history, the tank was hastily brought back into service. And that means another layer of chipping fluid, this time applied very sparingly and in a thin layer. We're gonna do some textured pre-dusting. Tamiya acrylics are absolutely peak for this, and let's take a moment to observe how all of that meticulous painting gets buried under a layer of dust. It's the same approach I took on my Leopard 2, but this time I learned from my mistakes and approached the effect with more caution and attention to detail. Because as soon as you start chipping the paint down, magic will happen. However, for the magic to work, a few requirements have to be met. First, you have to use my affiliate links. But no, seriously. The amount of chipping fluid has to be really small. Second, the layer of dust has to be thin and translucent. Third, on most surfaces, a soft, flat brush is the best chipping tool. And fourth, just a small amount of water is needed for the job. If you combine all of these together, you'll get beautiful, detailed and well-controlled result. Sure, the paint can get a bit sturdy in a few places because of the small amount of chipping fluid, but in those cases, a stiffer brush is your best friend. This has become my favorite technique and I can't wait to use it on the next model. However, this alone isn't the reason. Let me show you the real magic. Oil paints. That's unexpected. As far as I can remember, I only tried to use oil paints for these effects once, and I didn't quite like the result. They blend just too smoothly for my taste, and I like my earth effects to have a bit of grit. But here we already took care of that with the pre-dusting. So oils are actually a sensible choice, and if you combine these two mediums together, the workflow is like really seriously fun. However, the real reason I fell in love with this technique is the magical part. We still have a bit of leftover chipping fluid underneath, and this means we can remove the blended oil paints. Enamel thinner doesn't react with chipping fluid, so the blending process isn't disrupted. But the moment you hit the surface with water, you'll switch from blending to chipping. The results are absolutely bonkers, but I'll have to admit, most of the time they're quite subtle, because all we're doing with the oils right now is just that, subtle. But oh my goodness, it's so fun and so good. You can of course combine it with speckling and whatnot, and this is why my next model will be a desert vehicle. Anyway, to finish things off here, I once again reapplied the dark oil paint around those foldable cheeks and proceeded with the ugly stuff. And by that, I of course mean mud effects. Even though the shape and intended use of this tank calls for some extreme mud accumulations, I went the opposite way and kept the mud buildup extremely limited. Instead of oils, I used an enamel pigment mixture here. The only reason for that was logistics and efficiency. You know, the lower hull is dirtier than the upper surfaces, and that means a lot of paint will be needed here. And I didn't need as much precision and control here, so whatever. Again, blending, speckling, all of the cool stuff, in some places heavy, in others more subtle, but then, and that's the magic part, I went over everything with water and a soft brush for that refined and textured result. I mean, it's just so fun. Please try it out yourself. And let's not forget about the tracks. VMS Black Track Pro is the obvious choice when the tracks are made from metal, but once you're done, don't forget to clean them in soapy water to remove any excess fluid and stop the chemical reaction from continuing. At this point, I noticed the tracks had these flimsy flippers on the side, which would definitely get bent in real life, so I did that and then I enhanced their rusty appearance with Tamiya paints. I kept mixing them in the airbrush cup and thus I achieved some color variety, and then, again, I used chipping fluid. While I do the same thing again, let me tell you two important things. First off, check out my personal website, where you'll find this model as well, and it'll be for sale just like most of my other works. And second, it's summer, and what are we usually wearing in summer? That's right, t-shirts. And you know who has t-shirts? I do. Hand in hand with Plastic Invasion. And right now, we have a 50% summer sale on my official licensed, patented, overpowered merch. So go get it while you can, because otherwise I'll be very sad. All of these weathering techniques have been making me very happy, so I don't want to be sad. And I just started to wonder if I'm enjoying them so much because I built an airplane before. Even the dark earth tones were fun on this one. A part of me wanted to keep the tank in those dry, dusty colors, but there are just so many modern reference images showing that even heavily dusty tanks are not just about dust. There are always stains of moisture and other cool things, and if the tank is moving in mixed terrain, well, things are always exciting. Besides, I'm leaving the mostly dry look for the next model. When we break it down, these effects are the same thing, like the technique is the same. Apply, blend, speckle, just the amount is different. The application is more subtle, blending is more careful, but the speckling can be heavier if needed. And also streaking. The contrast is super good here, so I took my time and did some quick streaking. The sponsons, which also acted as internal fuel tanks, will be nicely visible on the finished model. Before we put the tracks in place, the metal wheels need their signature polished look. Silver aka acrylic marker followed by graphite powder is my go-to method. Of course, if this tank was rusting on a pedestal, these contact points would be completely rusted out. A tank with 4 tracks means twice the trouble if the tracks are sketchy. That's why I believe metal tracks are an absolute must on a model like this, because they are sturdy and easy to line up properly, even when brute force is required. Once they were in place, I did a few color adjustments with the dark earth tone so they could nicely match the weathering on the tank. And I mean, just look at them. This is why I like the Object 279 so much. I also added a few darker stains on the upper surfaces to make the model more visually consistent. It's shaped like a flying saucer, and having the lower half mostly dark while the rest is light and dry would be just too much. The exhaust suit was all done with an airbrush and a mixture of Tamiya flat black and flat brown. This finishing touch truly made the exhaust stand out. I liked the process so much that I even recreated old leaks of grease on the running gear. A vehicle that's been standing still for years without maintenance is bound to get leaky after all. Spilled fuel is another effect that exists, and it's an effect of all time. So this is gonna be controversial, but I wanted to have at least one element of the weathering process that would look extremely striking even from a distance. Luckily, it's not all make-believe, as I've seen large orange spills of diesel mixed with dust on multiple vehicles from Afghanistan and Syria, and probably other areas as well. This enamel is extremely glossy, so I used the streaking rust effect to make it more opaque and also less shiny. Luckily, we have a lot of time to go back and forth and adjust it to our liking. It's effects like these that draw the most attention because they stand out from the rest so much. Finally, I polished the worn edges with a pencil. As usual, this is the final step because enamel thinner dissolves graphite, so it's best to apply it once everything else is finished. It's a monotonous job, but it adds so much to the model. I also added the antenna, which I painted grey and added a bit of rust to it. And with that out of the way, the model was pretty much finished. I designed a simple display base for it and got it printed on an FDM printer by my friend. So, my friends, my mission is over. This model has been waiting to get completed for almost a decade. I still remember how cold it was outside because I built it in January 2018. Over the years, I had different plans with it. At first, I wanted to paint it as a relatively fresh vehicle during off-road trials based on those few existing historical images. Then I considered a 3-tone Arctic camouflage and also a post-apocalyptic setting in the Metro 2033 universe. Ultimately, I settled on this heavily faded finish based on reality, and I think it wasn't a bad decision. It's a finish I haven't done yet, and the process taught me a bunch of new, exciting techniques. Sometimes with these detailed and well-built shelf queens, there comes a lot of expectation, like this model needs to look like this and that, and needs a lot of love and care, otherwise you won't do it justice. But I approached it as a completely blank slate. I didn't worry about anything, not even once, and ended up enjoying the whole process. So, what are your thoughts? As mentioned, the next model will be a desert vehicle, and it'll be relatively modern, so to speak. Until then, thank you for all of your support. Each one of you has turned my life for the better, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for that. Special thanks goes to my patrons because their help allows me to buy paint thinners in amounts that would make a doomsday prepper embarrassed. And if you're one of them, thank you so much, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be able to run this channel for a living. You'll get a lot of cool stuff if you join me on Patreon. I post regular updates, share work in progress photos, various thoughts and observations from the workbench, and we keep in touch through DMs, comments, and emails. Top tier patrons get early access to all of my videos, completely ad-free, and also my Patreon exclusive video format called Night Shift Throwback, where I go back to the latest video and talk about every technique and interesting part in long, winded, detailed monologues. These videos are usually an hour or more long, making them perfect to listen to while you're modeling. There are also bonus extras like 3D printable parts for your own projects, reference photos from real life, and high-res studio shots of my models that show way more detail than video ever could. Your financial support is appreciated, but never expected. Anyway, our wedding took place during a heat wave and it was 38 degrees Celsius, but apart from that, it was a blast and we have so many beautiful and fun memories from that day. By the time this video comes out, we'll be back from our honeymoon vacation and then I'll sink my teeth into the new project. And remember, build your models, don't just hoard them. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!